Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
All right, a new bill proposed in Alabama would require some residents to pass a drug test in order to receive food stamps. Is that okay? If passed, the bill would require anyone applying for SNAP benefits to be tested if there's reasonable suspicion that the person uses or is under the influence of a drug. As of November 2018, 19.3 million households in America participate in the SNAP program. So does drug testing for food stamps go too far, or is it necessary? Here to debate it is registered independent and Democratic strategist Rochelle Ritchie and Mark Little, who's a lawyer and vice chair of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. So, Rochelle, start with you. Is that too much to ask to make sure you're not on drugs to get free food?
Well, you know, I think what this state senator has literally done is he's criminalized being poor in the United States. And I mean, and we have to think about this. He's also characterized poor people as being drug addicts and manipulating the system when, in fact, more than 75% of the recipients of SNAP benefits are families with children. Furthermore, I don't think he really understands the requirements in his own state to receive such benefits. You can actually go to rehab for drug and alcohol addiction and still receive SNAP benefits. So he's going to test these people. If they test positive, guess what? They go to rehab and they get the benefits anyway.
Mark, what's your sense? Do you think it's too much to ask to make sure people aren't drugs to get free stuff?
Well, I'll tell you, she really hit on something that I think is key. First of all, it's important to understand that the states have to work to get people to work and offer dependency on entitlement programs, number one. Number two, the drug testing requirement in this case is fair. It's fair for two reasons. It brings accountability for behavior, number one. And number two, it brings the opportunity to identify people who have a need for treatment. We have an opioid crisis in this country. And when you have an opportunity for the state to partner with CBOs and faith-based organizations, we have an opportunity to bring treatment instead of terminating benefits.
Rochelle, could you see this being a positive? They're doing it in 13 other states.
I think it's positive if you're providing people with treatment, but I don't think that it's positive if you're going to tell people that because you smoked marijuana or because you maybe took too much ibuprofen without a prescription that you cannot buy groceries for your family. That's the problem I have. This senator should obviously be addressing the drug, epidemic that we're seeing across the country. But I don't think that continuously to monitor people who have overcome addiction or who have paid their debt to society for, their drug convictions should continue to be monitored in this way. At some point, it turns into harassment.
Mark, in particular, do you believe that most people on the program want off?
Well, I don't know if they want off, but I can tell you something about this bill. The reasonable suspicion language, one is subjective, and it's really too broad. You shouldn't have to look back 5 years on somebody's criminal history when, in fact, if their probation for their prior offense is terminated, there shouldn't be a look back at all. I think there's some problems with the bill. I know that people find that there's a stigma in testing, but the state has an obligation and a right to manage a program, an entitlement program in its state.
Yeah.
You know, Brian, I want to mention one thing. I know one thing that people say about drug testing people is, well, if you go to work, you get drug tested. If you have a job, you're drug tested. Well, I worked on the Hill for Congress, and guess what? As a press secretary for the House, we were not drug tested. So not every single job is drug testing people.
Right. Yeah,
but certainly it is a standard in the country, and we shouldn't hold them to any lesser standard.
Mark Little, Rochelle Ritchie, think you both made great points.
It is Wednesday, the 13th of March of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. This is the day that Manafort gets sentenced. And I've been in a bit of a bubble, and I don't know if the judge is going to take all 3 hours. With a recess. I just don't know. But we'll be checking in during the breaks because I've been in a bubble for quite a while here. I had to turn it off because I had to get to work to be able to get this show together. We curate, you know, and that takes a bit of effort to do that. It does. Well, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Hey, so Tucker Carlson's gone on vacation. Yeah, a sudden vacation, unplanned. Well, actually, it hadn't been made public before. It wasn't on the schedule, but I guess he's going to spend more time with his family of Swanson TV dinners, because I don't know if the wife and kids want to be spending any time with that ghoul. God. And think how old his daughters were when he was spouting off about the Teen USA thing. Yuck. Boy. You know, he is the epitome, so emblematic. I think he's the face of the perpetual frat boy. He always struck me as one of these, well, you know what I mean, especially when he had the bow tie. You know, the bow tie was a nice touch. Yes, I'm so elite. There was something haughty and pompous about him. Still is. Yeah, remember he also would brag. He for a while there, he was bragging about going into Washington, D.C. public bathrooms and beating the crap out of gay guys. I don't know. I mean, I saw him a couple of times. I'm thinking, this guy actually went into a bathroom to beat up a gay guy, and he got his ass kicked by a gay guy. And so he can't really admit that because of his, I don't know, cosmological construct in the echoes of his mind. Well, Tucker, I hope you have a nice vacation. Usually when people go up to the farm, you know, they usually don't come back. Mm-hmm. Well, we can only hope. We can only hope. What's on the rest of the menu here today? Hey, you know, because it's going to be a big news day with the Manafort sentencing. And, of course, we got Flynn. We got to figure out what's going on with Flynn. He's getting an extension on his sentencing, too. Well, that was Democratic strategist Rochelle Ritchie at the top about speaking about how Alabama is wanting to criminalize the poor people, which they mean blacks. Because trust me, if you're white, you're not really going to get drug tested as much for your food stamps. Maybe they will. I mean, there is an opioid crisis. I would then venture that possibly, why don't we drug test the lobbyists who keep allowing these opioids to flood the market, huh? Yeah, I'm not talking about street stuff. I'm talking about the, the legal. The legal stuff is where we're having the issue. There's so much out there, it has to get on the street somehow, right? Well, I hope that people would follow my motto when it comes to the opioid crisis. Do not take any drugs for medicinal reasons. That's how they get you hooked. They give you a little, here, take this, 2 times a day, once a day, 2 times a day, whatever we do. And after a week to 10 days, you're hooked. Then they got you. And heaven forbid you should have diabetes. What the hell is going on with that? Did you know that the people who developed and patented, excuse me, insulin Their royalty or their fee was a measly $3 because they said, this is for humanity. This is for the world. So they took a token $3. I think that was a filing fee for the patent. So they said, okay, we'll get the patent for free. And now what? Something that cost $60 a month is now almost $900? And the people pushing this idea, like the Scarelli, the Farmer Bro guy. I mean, this is the Farmer Bro guy's philosophy, this whole business model. We can jack up the price because we can. We have a captive market, and there's apparently a lot of them. Right in time for the aging of the boomers, the real aging. I knew this was going to happen as soon as the glut of all of us boomers hit the Soylent Green track. We would be ground up for food. We're not going to be eating the rich. Trust me. And who would want to? God, it would be like stringy, soft, icky. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That Coast Guard officer, described by prosecutors as a domestic terrorist, well, he's not going to be facing any terrorism charges, even though he's a terrorist, because he's white. Okay, KKK, Nazi, they're not terrorists. Let's be clear. They have a constitutional right to their opinions. And don't you forget it, ever. A GOP congressman who votes with Trump 92.5%. That's like almost 92.5% of the time wants investigations into people who disagree with him. Well, that's small government. Yeah, a small part of the government comes after your ass. That's what they've been meaning the whole time. And I told you so. And Trump's budget ignores the real threat of the Russian election attack. Of course it does. Feature, not a bug. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where the top Republican on the U.S. House Armed Services Committee opposes the Trump plan to fund the vanity border wall with U.S. defense funds. And France signed their first military cooperation accord with Ethiopia that includes helping the landlocked nation build a navy. I don't know. That's what it says. Landlocked, they're getting a navy. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the contribute button. Do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. That recurring contribution keeps our lights on, the bills paid, and the totals just increased. So nothing ever goes down. What's up with that? But thank you for your generosity. It really does help us because I have to admit most of it comes out of our own pockets, and it's tough. So thank you for your generosity in helping us keep this little bastion of resistance resisting as the founders originally intended. And then if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that for us. And I am on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And I do try to get the social media linked to that diary, so look for that as well. You can follow the show on Netroots Radio at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Well, now we've got this big college cheating scandal. I don't want it to suck up all of the air out of everything else that's going on. But we're Democrats, and I think that we can juggle a few balls in the air, or objects. They don't have to be balls now. And all at the same time, and be able to give them their proper due. And this cheating scandal, I might have some ambivalence to it. I did come to recognize that, that everybody knew that a lot of the rich kids got there through, well, back then it was called legacies. Legacy was part of it. That was when your parent was an alumnus of the institution, and you got a leg up that way. Sometimes more than a leg up, maybe even a slot. But regardless, legacy was the affirmative action that was the most obvious. The bribing, now, of course, that happened. It's always happened. It's just that now they got caught. I came to recognize at the time, and recognize it even more over the intervening years, is that you needed to have some rich kids in there. You really did. You weren't necessarily getting a glut, but you needed to have a sizable amount, because otherwise, and I know this, and you could say it's from anecdotal experience, but I've seen it through relatives who have experienced the same thing. We've all mentioned it. That if you didn't have these rich kids brought in under their affirmative action, whether it be bribing a coach on the water polo team or whatever, you wouldn't have ever learned during college about how to extend a weekend from Thursday until Tuesday. You wouldn't have known that you could just sit in your dorm room and, watch the Galloping Gourmet. That's how old I am. Yeah. So I would not have known about the concept of slacking. Of course, we didn't call it slacking, but that's what it was. Until I met a bunch of rich kids who got in because they didn't have to work as hard. Man. And that's a good thing to know, because if you don't know it, you won't know the pain of what it is to not really have the infrastructure to back you up to get away with it all. Okay, let that be clear. Models of behavior, my ass. All right, well, let's get on with this Coast Guard officer, another model of behavior. And I don't know why we can't come to an agreement that a white domestic terrorist is a terrorist and should be, shall we say, tried and convicted as such. But white goes a long way in this country. It really does. This is Out of Think Progress by Luke Barnes, the Coast Guard lieutenant who plotted the murder of prominent Democrats and journalists, is facing up to 31 years behind bars, but has not been charged with terrorism. Yeah, it would be unseemly if he was charged with terrorism and then Trump pardoned him. It's easier now. It is. Because there's some very fine people on both sides. Christopher Hassan, 49, was arrested last month by federal agents on drugs and weapons charges. In the initial federal detention motion, prosecutors said the charges were the proverbial tip of the iceberg and described Hassan as a domestic terrorist, bent on committing acts dangerous to human life that are intended to affect governmental conduct, the very definition of terrorism. The motion went on to describe the hallmarks of a far-right extremism, which Hassan had allegedly displayed, allegedly, because Luke here is being the journalist that he is. But it's not so alleged when we already know that he did. But he hasn't gone to court, so yeah, it's semantics. Let's be clear. He displayed this. He was obsessed with Anders Behring Breivik, that Norwegian far-right terrorist who killed 77 people, mostly teenagers, by the way. You know, he blew up a bomb near a government building, killed a couple of people in a city. And then he hit it to this island where a lot of these young party activists of the prevailing liberal party would go every year, and they'd learn about government and, you know, have rowing contests. You know, it was summer camp for kids, but it was also a learning situation and integrating into society and the political structure of the nation. And that was a threat, because what was it? It was a bunch of liberals actually running things, and that can't happen. And Breivik went there with military-style weapons and killed these kids, 76 or so. Chased them down. Took hours. Well, Hassan allegedly made thousands of online searches for neo-fascist and neo-Nazi literature, compiled a hit list of prominent Democrats and journalists, and researched their locations and security arrangements. Well, obviously, when it's that, it's not terror. Come on. Hassan also allegedly amassed an arsenal of rifles, allegedly, because we only have pictures of it when they busted him. Let's just be clear. Rifles, handguns, bulletproof vests, and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition. He also acquired the opioid tramadol and more than 30 bottles of the human growth hormone because he wasn't agitated enough. Despite this evidence, and despite prosecutors' description of Hassan as a domestic terrorist, he was only arraigned Monday on one count of unlawful possession of 2 improperly registered silencers, possession of 17 firearms by an unlawful user, and possession of a controlled substance. Terroristic threats against Democrats? Yeah, that's just a course for the day. He's entitled to his opinion. He is. A spokeswoman for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland stressed that the investigation was ongoing and that law enforcement was still combing through a number of seized items, which could lead to additional charges later on. Law enforcement officials frequently struggle to bring domestic terrorism charges, even in seemingly obvious cases like Hassan's. When dealing with alleged extremists tied to ISIS, for example, federal prosecutors are allowed to present a wide range of evidence, proving the individual's support for the group, including retweets or reposted GIFs from social media accounts belonging to other sympathizers in order to bring terrorism charges. But domestic groups, including and most specifically far-right extremists, enjoy First Amendment protections, which means that professing support for them technically does not constitute terrorism in the same sense. It also means online searches for neo-Nazis or the manifesto of lone wolves like Breivik do not constitute support for terrorism in the same way. Well, even his public defender, Hassan's public defender, argued that. And, you know, I mean, do we criminalize people for their thoughts? Well, if those thoughts turn into actions, then amassing an arsenal is more than a thought, isn't it? Oliver Willis of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Republican Representative Brian Mast, a Repug of Florida, used a Tuesday hearing of the new House Select Committee on Modernizing Congress to ask that the government investigate people who disagree with him. At the hearing, Mast, who has voted with Trump 92.5% of the time, launched a paranoia-laced diatribe that seemed to be taken directly from the playbook of former Senator Joseph McCarthy, of the infamous demagogue who ruined lives with his fear-mongering of communist infiltration, suggesting that his political foes should be vetted. Do we have representatives who will share information with their staff who may have no clearances? Do we have representatives who are sympathetic to terrorist groups such as the Palestinian Authority, or who would disclose information to individuals like Abbas? Well, how about, in my reporter's opinion, how about on your side, just going and giving it to Vlad in the Oval Office, sometimes personally? Do we have representatives who are sympathetic to socialist ideals, such as those who would share sensitive information with like-minded leaders like Maduro? Do we have representatives with knowledge of national security secrets that may inadvertently be disclosed on U.S. operations to states like Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China? Mast made it sound as if merely differing from the Trump Republican Party line would make a member of Congress more likely to betray America to a foreign power or release secrets to the world. You mean like what Trump's done? He singled out members of Congress who criticized the Israeli government. Mast previously volunteered with the Israeli army, so he ought to know how fun it is. He also complained about people supposedly sympathetic to socialist ideals being a threat after he voted for the Republican tax scam. Now, as I've stated before, capitalism I've always defined as I like what you have and I'm going to take it no matter what. And socialism I've always defined as sharing is better than taking. So someone's going to take it. Maybe it's really they're just sharing it with themselves. So I don't know. You choose. But apparently Mast thinks that you can just throw out the term socialism like you did during the Cold War. It would work if they weren't in cohorts with a bunch of mobster terrorist socialists. I don't know. What is socialism anymore? Well, Republicans don't have much left in their arsenal besides demonization. Trump is unpopular, and the party lost the House, while several key Senate seats will soon be up for election. But they have benefited from demagoguery and paranoia before. Yeah, like way back when Joseph McCarthy was doing his shtick. Mass conspiracy-laden diatribe is just the latest salvo in a decades-long campaign of dishonesty. We'll be going a tad into our break period, but that's okay. We're taking it leisurely. This next article is out of Think Progress by Danielle McLean. America needs to spend an estimated $900 million to upgrade its election cybersecurity in order to stop Russia from once again attacking electronic ballot boxes and influencing the 2020 election. However, the White House's 2020 budget proposal released on Monday does not provide any additional funding, nor does it even address the issues of election security. In January, intelligence community leaders told Congress that Russia meddled in the 2016 and 2018 elections, and based on assessments of every branch of the intelligence apparatus, they were certain Russia is planning to interfere in the upcoming 2020 election. Lawrence Norton, deputy director of the Brennan Center's Democracy Program, told Think Progress he is hopeful Congress will reject the White House's budget proposal and provide additional funds in next year's budget to help respond to the threat, as it did last year. But he added, it is unfortunate that the White House continues to ignore the issues entirely. Well, excuse me, Mr. Norton, they're not ignoring it. Not by accident, certainly. Last year, Congress provided $380 million to help states boost election cybersecurity, purchasing new voting equipment, and improve post-election audits. But another $900 million is needed to address the cybersecurity threat nationwide. White House officials did not immediately respond to questions about why the budget did not include election security funds. All right, let's get on to our break now, and when we come back from the break, we'll go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, A Homecoming. When a new film from two-time Oscar winner Asghar Farhadi comes around, all eyes are going to be upon it. And so it is with Everybody Knows. The setup is a wedding which has relatives near and far returning home to a small town in Spain. One of the latter, Laura, has come from Argentina, Saul's husband, at least for the start, and with her 2 kids. It's Laura's sister who's being wed. A character from nearby is Paco, who runs a vineyard near town. It takes a while to achieve clarity as to all the relationships, but we soon find out that Paco and Laura, Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz, the central characters, have a past. As Farhadi paints this sumptuous celebratory scene, and taking clues from his other films, we know that something is about to happen, and we come to suspect that it will involve Laura's wild teenage daughter, Irena. That something is that she is kidnapped, with instructions following closely on not to call police. It's on the path to resolution where this picture shines, as old relationships, including financial arrangements and old resentments and secrets, one of which you might see coming, intertwine to strongly suggest an inside job. What we have here is storytelling through character development, focusing especially on the character's past. Before the kidnapping, when Irena and her just-found boyfriend ascend a medieval clock tower filled with beautifully captured ancient machinery, we see dates and initials carved into the wall. It's only later that we realize that this is where the stage is really being set. The conclusion here is not tragic, neither is it fulfilling. Various characters mouth the words of the title Everybody Knows throughout. Were the film less nuanced and well-acted, a case could be made that the title contained a spoiler. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back at our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. In the movie Armageddon, an asteroid the size of Texas is hurtling towards the Earth. All seems lost, but then Bruce Willis sacrifices his own life to detonate a thermonuclear bomb on the asteroid. And then you hear this from Mission Control.
The two halves are going to miss us by 400 miles, and most of the small particles have been vaporized.
Breaking a rock that big into 2 halves that somehow miraculously dodge the Earth, it's a bit of Hollywood magic. But scientists are studying what would really happen in such a scenario.
A big part of what we do is basically looking at how things break, smashing things together, and what happens after that.
Charles Almir is a mechanical engineer who studies planetary science at Johns Hopkins University. He and his colleagues modeled what might happen if you smashed up a 15-mile-wide asteroid made of basalt. They started by assuming the asteroid has some tiny cracks already running through it, based on studies of real rock. And then they struck the hypothetical space rock with another, smaller rock, just a mile wide, screaming towards the asteroid at more than 11,000 miles per hour. When it hit, they tracked how stress waves propagated through the asteroid and expanded the network of cracks. Previous impact models predicted that an impact like that would completely pulverize the asteroid, basically turning it into sand. But not this new model.
In what we're seeing, after the impact, you have this big chunk of rock that was still held together, that was still not completely broken down. And this piece of rock creates its own gravitational field, which attracts the particles that were ejected from it, and they start reaccumulating over it.
The scientists described the model in the journal Icarus. And the work suggests asteroids might actually be harder to smash than we thought, meaning
we might need to have in a faster impactor or a larger mass of impactor coming in to be able to deflect it efficiently.
In 2022, NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test Mission, or DART, will attempt to put all this knowledge to the test by shoving a near-Earth asteroid off its path. No Bruce Willis required. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
In the U.S., about 15% of people who have HIV don't know they have it. If you have it, the sooner you get diagnosed, the sooner you can start life-saving treatment. Everyone should get tested at least once, and those at high risk should get tested at least once a year. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, get tested as soon as possible. Healthcare providers, conduct routine testing according to CDC's guidelines. Screen all youth and adults for HIV risk behaviors. Help patients understand their risk and the best prevention options. If people test positive, link them to treatment and prevention counseling quickly. HIV testing is important. Know your HIV status. See your healthcare provider to get tested or find a testing site at gettested.cdc.gov. You can also get a home testing kit online or from a drugstore. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Was justice served when Paul Manafort received a 47-month sentence for tax and bank fraud involving over $55 million? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Manafort received a 47-month sentence instead of the 19.5 to 24.5-year sentence called for by the federal sentencing guidelines because the judge felt that the guidelines for this white-collar crime were too long and that 47 months in prison is a long time to be caged. Which is beyond question true. What grates on some lawyers and commentators is not that Manafort's sentence was too short, but that by comparison with other sentences for less serious crimes, it was shorter. As Senator Cory Booker said, the criminal justice system, quote, treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you are poor and innocent, and preys upon the vulnerable, including the poor, the mentally ill, the addicted, and overwhelmingly people who are black and brown. If Manafort's sentence makes this clear to the public, legislators, and judges, the sentence actually has served the interest of justice.
Now as through this world I ramble, I see lots of funny.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU.
Some will rob you with a 6-gun, some with a fountain pen.
Because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1906. This is the day the world lost a great champion of women's and workers' rights, Susan B. Anthony. Born in 1820 in Massachusetts to a Quaker family, Susan is most well known for her tireless campaign to secure the right to vote for women. But did you know she was also a staunch supporter of women's rights in the workplace? She experienced the unequal treatment of women in the workplace firsthand. In 1848, Anthony was a teacher in New York, where she discovered that male teachers earned $10 a month to teach, while women only earned $2.50. Anthony became involved in the teachers' union, continually advocating for equal pay and advancing the call for the 8-hour workday. She encouraged women excluded from participation in the labor movement by men to form their own labor organizations. And in 1870, she helped to found the Working Women's Central Association. Anthony was often rebuffed and ignored by men in her effort to give women a greater voice in the labor movement. In 1869, she took a controversial stand during a strike of union printers in New York. During the strike, she encouraged women to participate in training programs to teach them the printing trade during the strike. She believed that this would prove that women could do the job as well as men. Because of her stance, many within labor labeled her as a strikebreaker. In the decades that followed, Anthony continued to build relationships within labor and encouraged women to participate in trade unionism. One of Susan B. Anthony's most often repeated quotes was, "Join the union, girls, and together say equal pay for equal work." A call to action that resonates today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. I'm C. Marie Ainsborough.
I didn't want to become a domestic worker. For me, it was a shameful job. The lowest form of work. I wanted to be a teacher. But I had no option. My parents are farmers. I have 10 brothers and sisters. I had to earn money to support my parents.
That is Noelita Palasok from the Philippines. She's one of the world's 70 million domestic workers. In a recent talk she gave in Geneva, Ms. Palasok described the years of abuse, sexual harassment, and poor pay she endured as a domestic worker in various countries. She managed to send money to her parents and even save for teachers' college. She returned to the Philippines after working in the Gulf, graduated as a teacher, and got a job.
I thought it was a dream job, but I earned less than I expected. My salary is lower than the salary of a domestic worker. So I quit my job and back to domestic worker again. At this time, a friend, Himaya, tried to convince me to join the union. She is a former domestic worker, but now an organizer of domestic worker. She said, "Novelita, please come join the union." "No," I replied. But then the second time again, she approached me. "Novelita, the union can help you." And then by the second time, I said, no again. I was in denial about my situation. I still felt that domestic work was shameful. But in the end, I went to a regional meeting called the United Domestic Workers Action Group, now called the United Domestic Workers Union in the Philippines. It was an eye-opener. They tell me about my rights and responsibilities of the employer. I realized that domestic work was decent work and not shameful. So the group, which I avoided for so long, changed my life. Today, I work to make ensure that no other domestic workers experience what I did. And in 2014, I joined the union. And in 2015, I was elected as a chapter president. And in 2017, I became the national president. This is a big responsibility, but members choose me to represent well their issues and concerns. What we have achieved so far, in just 3 years, we have grown up to 200 to 2,000 members. This is a lot because many domestic workers are afraid of joining union. They fear that their employers would fire them if they join the union. We ensure that ILO Convention 189 and Domestic Workers Act in 2012 was implemented. We have built an organization that listens to domestic workers, promote and defend our rights. We also help domestic workers to better negotiate with their rights and to stop sexual harassment and abuse. They can tell us now that they can better negotiate rights, add for additional day offs, and pay for them their social benefits. We joined the International Domestic Workers Federation, a global 500,000 of domestic workers fighting for our rights. And I was just elected as a regional representative in Asia in the International Domestic Workers Federation.
You can hear Ms. Palasok's full speech on the Radio Labor website at www.radiolabor.net. I'm Sue Marie Ainsborough. Thank you for listening.
From UN headquarters, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced this week the U.S. intends to withdraw all of its diplomats from Venezuela due to the deteriorating situation in the country. But in the same tweet announcing that withdrawal, Pompeo turned heads by saying their presence had become a constraint on U.S. policy, sparking concerns the U.S. could be planning its own military action in Venezuela that could put the diplomats at risk.
It's sort of like parsing what the Delphic Oracle is saying here. They're leaving their messages deliberately deniable and vague.
Adam Isaacson directs the Defense Oversight Program at the Washington Office on Latin America.
But if their goal is to maybe instigate a rebellion in the Venezuelan military or to further destabilize things through fears of a coup or fears of invasion, this would be the way that you would do it.
The U.S. has been making those sorts of threats before. In January, National Security Advisor John Bolton was seen with a notepad bearing the words 5,000 troops to Colombia, and President Trump has called the prospect of U.S. military action, quote, an option. But if the U.S. is merely concerned about diplomatic safety, Isaacson said Pompeo could easily have said that, and he didn't. Emma Ashford, a foreign policy research fellow at the Cato Institute, agrees.
There's been a lot of these very escalatory, very saber-rattling statements coming out of the administration, and I do remain concerned that their sort of approach to the Venezuela problem seems to be to ratchet up tensions and suggest that they might go further.
While Ashford thinks any military threats are just bluster, she says that bluster is still reflective of a naive assumption that foreign pressure could imminently lead to regime change.
We have seen absolutely no evidence that that is the case. And so when I look at what the administration is doing, I see a strategy that just seems to be very detached from reality. A lot of very strong statements, but it's not clear at all what it is they're actually planning to do about it.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, and it even feels like 33 degrees. And that's a good thing. We are experiencing cloudy conditions, light and variable winds out of the north, and will remain so, it looks like, for at least the next couple of days. Expecting a high in the low 50s, overnight lows in the mid to low 30s, and we might be in a little drying out period, though humidity will still be high. No rain until later on, maybe after the weekend. So a little bit more of a drying out period than what we've experienced previous. Let's see here. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is rated good at 20 parts per million. And the daytime UV index has ticked up one digit to 3 and right into the moderate range. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.05 inches. Visibility is just about 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. So still pretty high relative humidity. Weather from around the world is brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 52 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 52 and cloudy. Rome is 57 and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 43 and fair. Kabul is 41 with showers in the vicinity. Bomb showers? No, it's rain showers, don't worry. Hong Kong is 67 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 44 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 71 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 47 and clear. And New York is a crisp and bright 39 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Bushes and Gurley of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The top Republican on the U.S. House Armed Services Committee said he opposed Donald Trump's plan to use $7 billion from the military budget to build a wall on the border with Mexico. Representative Mac Thornberry said he backs the wall, but not with Pentagon funds, calling Trump's overall $750 billion defense budget request the bare minimum of what the U.S. military needs. There are things you can't do if you fund non-defense items with defense dollars, and I don't think that's a good idea. Whatever the merits of the other program, Thornberry, a Republican representing the Texas Panhandle, said to a roundtable of journalists. The comments from Thornberry, a former chairman of the Armed Services Panel, underscored the bipartisan opposition facing the budget Trump sent to Congress on Monday, even among those who back many of his programs. Now, of course, Democrats dismissed the budget proposal as dead on arrival, and they should. Thornberry also questioned Trump's request for $165 billion of the Pentagon's war-fighting account, nearly 3 times last year's $60 billion allocation, and widely seen as an attempt to spend more on the military without having to reach an agreement with Democrats on spending for domestic programs. I don't think this is the Pentagon's idea, Thornberry said, instead calling for the two sides to negotiate a spending agreement. I think the way we negotiate a spending agreement is to kick the guy out of office, but I'm a romantic. Thornberry joined many of his fellow Republicans as well as Democrats in disputing the wisdom of steep cuts at the State Department. Trump proposed reducing spending on diplomacy by 23% and slashing more than 30% from foreign aid. We need the State Department, Thornberry added. Do you think? He's such an institutionalist. Wow. Separately, Congress is on the verge of approving a resolution to reject Trump's declaration of an emergency at the southern border as a way to get money to build the wall and keep a campaign promise without lawmakers' approval, just like Vlad planned it. But hey, I jest.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
John Irish, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It looks like Ethiopia and France have agreed to their first military cooperation accord, a deal that includes helping the landlocked nation build a navy, as Paris seeks to boost economic ties in Africa's second most populous country. I don't know why I'm laughing about a landlocked nation getting a navy. I mean, many need it. Russia, in particular, has always wanted a southern port, but they have their northern one, too. And you can't really be a poet, philosopher, king wherever you are without a navy. Everybody knows that. All right, we have to get out of here a tad earlier. Maybe we're on time, but we've got some chores that we have to attend to right away. And but we'll meet up tomorrow, of course, for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.